This fire season could be a lot later and different than years past. And we'll get to that in our fire season outlook in just a minute. But first, we need to understand how wildfires work and how that relates to weather. Here's Cameron to explain.
Let's talk about the dynamics of wildfires, how they happen, and what makes them spread and become so dangerous. The first thing you need to consider is wildfire weather, and that's going to be hot, dry, and windy. Hot, well, that adds to low humidity, which makes it dry, and dry makes vegetation dry, which acts as the fuel to start that wildfire and keep it burning. That is what's burning in the first place. Now, wind has its own little niche in this entire operation, and that's going to be both spreading out wildfires and giving them more oxygen. And that gets into the rest of the components here. So oxygen, like I just said, this is a burning reaction, so you need to continuously feed oxygen into the fire to keep it burning, otherwise it'll choke out. Fuel, that's going to be the dry vegetation, and that comes in all different shapes and sizes. You can have very small fuels, which are dry grasses and things like that, or huge fuels like the dry trees we see behind me. A heat source, now that can be anything from a cigarette butt to some sparks off the back of a vehicle, or even a lightning strike. And speaking of a lightning strike, our example today starts with that. You can see we've got our first ignition started there in some of those dry grasses, and then there's a little bit of a push. Now that push is happening because of the winds, and that's going to help to transport what are called firebrands, which are essentially just little burning embers all over into these neighboring trees. Trees have a particularly dangerous way of spreading called torching, which is when you have a firebrand land somewhere close to the bottom, it burns up the tree and then around the entire canopy, which is what we're seeing here. And if you have multiple ignition sources, like all those other lightning strikes, it really spreads this around because it happens in multiple areas, and then you have a gigantic fire complex that happens after. Now, if you are near an area where there could be a wildfire, you got to be ready to listen to your local fire authority. They'll tell you if and when you need to evacuate, and if it's time for that evacuation, it helps to be ready beforehand. Get everything that you could need for evacuation and put it into your vehicle because you might not be able to come back.